The mainstream view of drug use is that drug use is an addiction, that people who are addicted are suffering from some kind of disease and that they need help from the NHS rather than being criminalised, as they say. I think that this is complete nonsense, and I'm saying this as a former drug user, and not just in a small way. I used to use drugs heavily, particularly when I was in my second year of university. I'm very glad that I didn't believe that I was addicted. The reason I didn't believe that I was addicted was because I at least had the honesty to admit that the reason I took drugs was because I liked them and I wanted to use them, and for no other reason than that. I had no regard for myself in the long term, no real regard for anyone else. I was effectively a selfish person concerned with the pursuit of pleasure. And that's really what drug use teaches you to pursue. You become the sort of person who is only concerned with himself and his own pleasure and nothing more than that. And so I'm glad that I didn't believe that I was addicted, because that might have made me convince myself that I was powerless to stop myself. But I'm very glad that I realised I wasn't addicted and that I could stop at any time. I believed that the whole time. But when someone believes that he is addicted to drug taking, then suddenly his whole concept of free will has been diminished, and he believes that he cannot be held accountable for his own self-destruction or for the destruction of any other people. When he believes that he is diseased in the way that someone with any other kind of actual disease is diseased, then suddenly his responsibility for his own actions is removed. And I really think that this is part of a wider war on the concept of free will. We increasingly in our society like to believe that we don't have free will. There are various famous philosophers, for example, Sam Harris, who are putting forward the argument that we literally do not have free will, the sort of determinist types. I think overall you can see this taking place. People are becoming less and less accountable. People don't really like freedom as much as they care to admit. People like to be led by politicians more than they'd care to admit. Liberty isn't actually all that popular in reality. We'd actually much rather it be the case that we weren't accountable for our own actions and that we were just given assistance and help by other people at all times, and that we weren't responsible for anything. That's a much more attractive worldview to most people, even if they don't admit it. But the whole idea of drug use being a disease completely falls apart when we compare it with real diseases. And actually, I think it's quite an insult to people with real diseases to say that a drug user has a disease. Someone with a real disease cannot simply stop being ill. They cannot decide to be well again. And they would feel insulted if you were to suggest this. Whereas someone who takes drugs can decide to be well again. They can decide to simply stop taking the drugs, which is what I did. I used to take drugs. I then realised that that was a bad choice and I stopped doing them. Once I really thought about my life, once I'd gone through this kind of internal struggle with myself, as you do when you're sort of 20 years old or so, realised, okay, I'm going to be finishing university in a couple of years' time. What's my life actually going to be like? Am I going to be doing this forever? And I decided, no, enough's enough. And I quit one day, and that was the last time that I took them. I haven't taken drugs since then. It was a single decision. It wasn't a lengthy, very difficult process of taking myself off drugs. I had decided they were bad for me, and I didn't want to do them anymore because the consequences outweighed the rewards. And that was it. I decided to be well, and well I was. But someone with a real disease cannot make that decision. And we all know people who've made similar choices. We know people who give up alcohol, we know people who give up tobacco, we know people who give up video games and social media. People have the ability to make choices, and they have the responsibility, and they should be accountable for those choices. But we don't like those ideas. We don't like that idea in society. We don't like the idea that we are actually responsible for our own actions anymore.